So what if the reason you can't bounce back from, like, a massive failure isn't actually a lack of grit or resilience?
Right.
What if it's the very words you use to describe what just happened to you?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds almost too simple, right? But human neurobiology is heavily influenced by language.
Right.
The narratives we construct around our setbacks can literally dictate whether our brains process an event as a fatal threat or, as a fascinating puzzle.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today, we are dissecting something that every single listener has encountered, yet very few actually know how to leverage.
Yeah, the anatomy of failure.
Exactly. But we're taking a completely different angle with the research and sources we pulled together today. We are analyzing the psychology of failure entirely through the lens of 15 common English idioms.
Which is, frankly, a brilliant diagnostic tool. I mean, idioms aren't just colorful phrases. They are fossilized pieces of human psychology.
Oh, I like that phrasing, fossilized psychology.
Right. By looking at how the English language has collectively decided to describe failure over the centuries, we get a direct window into how the human ego processes a collapsed goal.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to fundamentally shift your perspective.
Yeah.
We want to dismantle the idea that failure is this terrifying, shameful dead end.
Yeah.
By the end of this conversation, the goal is for you to recognize failure for what it actually is, which is high-density, highly valuable data.
Because when a major project collapses, say a business launch or a creative endeavor, a career pivot, the psychological weight is immense.
It really
It
is.
feels paralyzing. But true mastery of any field requires an almost surgical ability to navigate these exact setbacks. If you can't decode the wreckage, well, you can't build anything better.
So let's just bypass the pleasantries and drop right into the moment of impact.
The fun part.
Right. That visceral, deeply uncomfortable initial shock. You've poured months or years into an aspiration, and suddenly the floor falls out. In our language, we don't just say it didn't work out. We say the project had to bite the dust.
And the imagery there is incredibly telling. Biting the dust isn't a quiet miscalculation on a spreadsheet.
No, not at all.
It implies a total fall from grace. You are brought low, literally face down in the dirt. It strips away dignity.
Yeah.
And from a psychological standpoint, that loss of dignity is what triggers the brain's acute stress response. It's an ego death.
And if you want an even more dramatic framing, we use the phrase crash and burn. Think about what that actually evokes.
Oh, for sure.
A crash and burn is a sudden, spectacular, and completely public destruction.
I'd argue it's the public aspect that makes a crash and burn so paralyzing. Evolutionary biology wires us to fear public failure because, well, historically, being perceived as incompetent meant tribal rejection.
Right, it meant you were out of the group.
Exactly. When your project crashes and burns, your amygdala spikes cortisol not just because the project failed, but because it perceives a threat to your social standing.
Wow.
The spotlight effect makes you believe everyone is, actively analyzing the smoke rising from your wreckage.
Which just compounds the realization that you have fallen short or missed the mark.
Those two phrases are uniquely painful cognitive traps. Think about the mechanics of missing the mark.
Okay.
The target was visible, the standard was known. You aimed directly at it, and you still lacked the capacity to hit it.
Yeah, it creates this massive wave of cognitive dissonance. You have this internal belief, right? Like, I am a capable, competent person.
Right.
But the external reality is holding up a sign saying, you just completely missed the mark. Those two realities cannot exist in the brain at the same time without causing severe psychological friction.
And that friction is why the ego's immediate response is to throw up a defensive shield. The ego's primary job is protection, not education.
Wow. Protection, not education.
Yeah, it essentially blinds you to the data collection phase.
Let's look at the mechanism of that protection for a second. Imagine spending hours on a beach constructing this incredibly complex sandcastle.
Okay, I can picture it.
You're mapping out the structural integrity of the walls, calculating the distance from the tide. Then, a single rogue wave sweeps in and flattens it in 2 seconds.
Oh, brutal.
Right. The ego's instinct in that moment isn't to study the water patterns or analyze the saturation of the sand. The instinct is to just kick a bucket, declare the beach stupid, and walk away.
The urge to walk off the beach is pure self-preservation. If you refuse to look at the flattened sandcastle, you don't have to confront the gap between your ambition and your actual skill level.
That makes so much sense.
We abandon the pursuit entirely because distancing ourselves from the failure is the fastest way to relieve the acute emotional pain.
But by doing that, we leave all the high-density data lying in the wet sand. We learn absolutely nothing about the tide.
Precisely. The ego whispers, if we never try this again, we can never be humiliated like this again. It opts for safety over evolution.
So the immediate shock eventually fades. The smoke from the crash and burn dissipates. If you haven't completely walked off the beach, you have to transition from the emotional shock to the analytical phase. You have to diagnose the disaster.
Right. This is the uncomfortable intersection where ambition is forced to look reality in the eye. When you retroactively analyze a failed project, it is almost never a surprise.
No.
No. In hindsight, we often realize the initial strategy was a recipe for disaster.
The word recipe does so much heavy lifting in that phrase, I think. It entirely removes the element of bad luck.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a recipe requires active participation. Went to the store, you bought the flawed ingredients, you mixed them together in the wrong proportions, and you set the oven too high. You literally baked the cake of your own demise.
You engineered the failure through a series of unchecked assumptions. And the most common ingredient in a recipe for disaster is the human tendency to bite off more than they can chew.
Taking on a burden that far exceeds your current capacity.
We see this across every industry. A founder tries to scale to 100 employees before nailing the product market fit for 10 customers.
Right.
Or a writer tries to outline a 7-book epic fantasy series before learning how to structure a single compelling scene. They bypass the foundational strength building because the ego wants the grand outcome immediately.
And because the structural integrity isn't there,
Yeah.
they don't just slow down, they hit a brick wall.
A brick wall doesn't yield. It doesn't care about your enthusiasm or your timeline. When you hit it, all forward momentum violently stops.
And that impact means you are now forced to learn the hard way.
Learning the hard way is basically the universe's mechanism for correcting a misaligned strategy. You refuse to learn through theory, you ignore the advice of mentors, so reality steps in to provide a distressing, undeniable personal experience.
Now, I want to pause and challenge the framing of our sources here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
The material paints biting off more than you can chew as a distinctly negative behavior, like a flaw to be avoided. But if we only ever take bites we know we can easily swallow, are we just metaphorically eating baby food our entire lives?
That's a fair point.
Doesn't growth inherently require overreaching?
I hear what you're saying about the necessity of ambition, but the data points to a crucial distinction between stretching your jaw and dislocating it.
Oh, okay.
Chronic overreaching actually damages long-term capacity. It's not about playing small, it's about structural integrity.
But without that massive ambition, humanity just stagnates.
Which is exactly why the sources identify high ambition as a blessing and a curse.
Ah, right.
The blessing is undeniable, right? It drives innovation, it pulls you out of complacency, it forces you to envision a reality that doesn't exist yet, but the curse is the shadow side of that vision.
The higher the ambition, the deeper the exposure to grief and frustration when the brick wall appears.
Yes, the curse is the psychological toll of the gap between the vision and the reality. True wisdom, the kind of operational knowledge that actually upgrades how you function in the world, is almost never acquired in times of easy success.
Because success just validates what you're already doing.
Precisely. Success validates your current operating system. It's only the disappointment of unmet expectations that forces an upgrade. Hitting that brick wall is incredibly painful, but it is a vital, unequivocal signal. It tells you that your old methods are officially obsolete.
The brick wall is undefeated against your current strategy. You cannot charm it, you cannot force it. You either evolve a new strategy or you stay stuck.
That is the function of the wall. It is an evolutionary filter.
So this brings us to a universal crossroads. Everyone listening to this right now has stood in front of that wall.
Oh, yeah.
You're out of momentum, your recipe failed, you're looking at an insurmountable obstacle. What is the actual mechanism of choice in that moment?
Statistically, the vast majority of people will choose the path that eliminates the immediate psychological discomfort. They will decide to throw in the towel.
It's a phrase straight out of boxing.
Yeah.
The fighter's taking too much damage, they're backed into the corner, and their coach literally throws a white towel into the ring to stop the fight before permanent injury occurs.
Notice the dynamic in that boxing metaphor, though. In the ring, it is the coach, an objective, outside observer, who throws the towel to save the fighter.
Okay. Yeah.
In life and in our careers, we're forced to play both the fighter taking the hits and the coach evaluating the damage.
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be the ones to look at our own bloody nose and decide, is this productive suffering that will lead to a breakthrough, Or is this just senseless damage?
And there's a profound, seductive psychological safety in throwing in the towel. The absolute second you decide to quit, the cognitive tension vanishes. The
Right.
stress of trying to solve the unsolvable problem evaporates. Your heart rate drops.
But the goal evaporates with it.
Exactly. You trade the future ambition for immediate relief. Now, the alternative to throwing in the towel is neurologically demanding. It requires the capacity for cognitive reappraisal.
Okay, what does that look like?
It's the ability to sift through the wreckage and recognize that every cloud has a silver lining.
I have a bone to pick with that phrase.
Uh-uh.
No, seriously. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Oh.
And a blessing in disguise. They have been totally reduced to toxic positivity bumper stickers.
Yeah.
People say them when they want to dismiss someone else's pain. Oh, you lost your business. Well, silver lining, more free time. It just feels hollow.
It feels hollow because we treat it as a passive observation rather than an active, difficult cognitive process.
Right.
Finding the blessing in disguise is not about pasting a fake smile over a disaster. Neurologically, when you are in a state of stress from a failure, your amygdala has hijacked your prefrontal cortex.
So you literally can't think straight.
Exactly. It is biologically difficult to see the wider perspective. To find the silver lining requires forcing the executive function of your brain back online to evaluate the data objectively.
Let's give the listener a concrete way to visualize this shift from the emotional brain to the analytical brain. Imagine being dropped into a massive, intricate hedge maze.
Okay.
You've been walking for hours, taking lefts and rights, and suddenly you hit a dead end, a solid wall of thorns. Throwing in the towel is sitting down in the dirt, crossing your arms, and letting the maze defeat you.
Right.
But finding the blessing in disguise isn't pretending you love the dead end. It's realizing that hitting the dead end is a mandatory map-making exercise.
I love that. The dead end isn't a failure, it is geographical data.
Exactly. It feels terrible because you didn't find the exit, but functionally, you have just eliminated a false path. You now know with 100% certainty where not to go. The map in your head is far more accurate than it was 10 minutes ago.
And if you study the psychology of serial innovators, this is their defining characteristic. The amateur values the easy path. The professional values the accurate map.
Wow. Values the accurate map.
You have to be willing to endure the sting of the dead end to map the maze. The harder, immensely more valuable path is staying in the wreckage, ignoring the ego's demand to run away, and extracting that geographical data.
So let's make this actionable. You stayed in the wreckage, you fought off the urge to walk off the beach or throw in the towel, you've mapped the dead end. Reframing the narrative is a great philosophical exercise, but what is the actual practical protocol when a plan has entirely collapsed?
You gather your newly acquired data, you sit down, and you go back to the drawing board.
Starting over from the beginning because the previous blueprint was fundamentally flawed.
Right. This is where theory becomes application. The drawing board is an engineering concept. Engineers don't cry when a prototype breaks under stress testing.
No, they don't.
They take the telemetry data back to the drafting table. You evaluate the variables that caused the crash and burn. You identify the structural weaknesses you previously ignored, and you design a superior approach.
I want to highlight how we usually say that phrase.
Okay.
Well, back to the drawing board. It's almost always accompanied by a deep sigh.
Yeah, very true.
It carries this heavy, exhausted connotation of punishment. But going back to the drawing board should feel like a massive upgrade.
How so?
Because you are not the same person who stood at that drawing board 6 months ago. Yeah. The first time you were there, you were guessing. You were operating on untested hypotheses.
Oh, that's good.
This time you were operating on cold, hard reality. You were starting over, but you were starting over armed with the exact blueprints of the brick wall you just hit.
That distinction separates those who recover from those who repeat their mistakes. It comes down to separating your identity from the prototype. The failure wasn't you, the failure was the blueprint. And this is the core definition of resilience. Resilience is not some magical, innate trait that prevents you from failing. Resilience is entirely about your capacity to weather the storm.
To successfully handle a crisis or period of intense difficulty without losing your structural integrity.
Think about the phrasing, weathering the storm. It implies an external, chaotic event. The storm is happening around you. The wind is howling. The rain is horizontal. But the storm does not have to get inside you.
The boat might be rocking violently, but it isn't taking on water.
Yes. Resilience is a measurement of volume. It is the internal capacity you have to process massive disappointment while maintaining your internal compass. The people who navigate the highest levels of achievement understand that the most profound successes belong to those who actively choose to rise from the ashes.
The myth of the phoenix, emerging renewed, stronger, and fundamentally transformed after a catastrophic destruction.
But notice the prerequisite for the phoenix. You cannot rise from the ashes if you stubbornly refuse to let the old flawed structures burn down.
Oh, wow.
The crash and burn wasn't an interruption of your journey, it was the necessary fire to clear the deadwood. The failure is the required mechanism for the transformation.
Let's weave this entire linguistic map together. We've traced the anatomy of failure through the evolution of the English language, and it tells a very clear story.
And it really does.
It starts with the visceral, ego-crushing shock of biting the dust and crashing and burning. We fall short and miss the mark, triggering the brain's defense mechanisms.
Then the intellect has to step in to diagnose the recipe for disaster, forcing us to admit where we bit off more than we could chew. We hit the brick wall, which forces us to learn the hard way that our old strategies are obsolete.
We stand at the crossroads, fighting the powerful psychological urge to just throw in the towel. Instead, we force our executive function back online to map the dead ends, finding the blessing in disguise within the wreckage.
And finally, we detach our identity from the failure, taking our upgraded, high-density data back to the drawing board. We weather the storm emotionally, allowing the flawed systems to burn so we can rise from the ashes.
What this journey reveals is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the data collection engine that makes success mathematically possible.
I want to turn this directly over to you, the listener. Think about a current project, a strained relationship, or a career goal where you have recently felt the sting of missing the mark. Take a hard look at the wreckage of that experience.
Yeah.
Which of the idioms we dissected today is currently running your internal narrative? Are you trapped in the ego-driven shame of the crash and burn? Or are you ready to shift your perspective, extract the geographical data from your dead end, and confidently walk back to the drawing board?
As you evaluate your own blueprints, we want to leave you with one final lingering idea to mull over. We established today how profoundly the language we use shapes our neurobiology and our perception of reality. So, what would happen if you conducted an experiment on yourself? What if you consciously, deliberately eradicated catastrophic phrases like crashing and burning or biting the dust from your personal vocabulary entirely?
That would be a game changer.
Yeah. Right. If, starting tomorrow, you only permitted yourself to describe your setbacks using the clinical terms of construction and data gathering words like testing, calibration, and iteration,
Right.
how might that completely alter your willingness to take massive, audacious risks?
It changes everything.
Because at the end of the day, a flattened sandcastle isn't the end of the beach. It's just a blank canvas for an architect who now knows exactly what the water can do.